Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to find a stranger standing over your bed, holding a knife to your throat. For 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart, this wasn't a nightmare. It was the beginning of a 9-month ordeal that would captivate the entire nation. What happened next would test the limits of human survival, shake public trust in law enforcement, and ultimately transform a young girl into one of America's most powerful advocates for missing children. This is the story of the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart. On the night of June 5, 2002, in the quiet, upscale Federal Heights neighborhood of Salt Lake City, Utah, the Smart family was sleeping peacefully in their home. Ed and Lois Smart had 6 children, and their second oldest daughter, Elizabeth, was a bright, talented 14-year-old who played the harp and was deeply involved in her faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But at approximately 1 a.m., something unthinkable happened. Elizabeth's 9-year-old sister, Mary Catherine, who shared a bedroom with her, woke to the sound of a male voice threatening Elizabeth. Terrified, Mary Catherine pretended to be asleep as she watched a man force her sister out of bed at knife point. The intruder had entered undetected after cutting through the screen of an open kitchen window. The man warned Elizabeth to remain silent and threatened to kill her family if she didn't comply. Within minutes, Elizabeth was gone, led away from her home in nothing but her red pajamas. Mary Catherine, paralyzed by fear that the man might return for her, waited 2 agonizing hours before running to her parents' room to tell them what had happened. When Ed and Lois Smart first heard their youngest daughter's story, they thought she'd had a nightmare. But as they searched every room and found no trace of Elizabeth, the horrifying reality set in. At approximately 4 a.m., they called 911. And within the hour, a massive search operation had begun.
Do you know why you're here?
Yeah.
Tell me why you're here.
Yeah, because of Elizabeth.
The investigation begins. The Salt Lake City Police Department immediately launched one of the most extensive investigations in Utah's history. Search dogs tracked Elizabeth's scent from the house, but lost it just feet from the property, suggesting she'd been taken away in a vehicle. The FBI joined the investigation, and volunteers flooded the area, searching on foot, horseback, and by helicopter. Police quickly identified Richard Ricci, a handyman with a lengthy criminal record, who had previously worked for the Smart family as a person of interest. Ricci was already in jail on an unrelated parole violation, but investigators believed he might have information about Elizabeth's disappearance. Despite intense questioning, Ricci maintained his innocence. Then, tragically, on August 30, 2002, Ricci died of a brain hemorrhage while still in custody, taking any potential knowledge with him to the grave. With their primary suspect dead and no new leads emerging, the case seemed to go cold. But the Smart family refused to give up. They created a website dedicated to finding Elizabeth, provided home videos to media outlets, and kept her story in the national spotlight. The family offered a reward of $250,000 for information leading to Elizabeth's safe return.
Witness News Special Report.
We begin today with the statewide alert for the missing girl and the man who took her.
Now, the kidnapping happened around 2 o'clock this morning, again, as we said, in the Salt Lake Federal Heights area. Abducted from her bedroom.
Her disappearance became one of the most followed missing persons cases in American media, featured repeatedly on news programs and shows like America's Most Wanted, The Nightmare in the Woods. While investigators chased false leads and the media speculated, Elizabeth was enduring unspeakable horrors just miles from her home. Her captor, Brian David Mitchell, forced her to walk 4 miles through the woods in her nightgown to a primitive campsite in the foothills outside Salt Lake City. There, she met Mitchell's wife, Wanda Barzee. Brian David Mitchell was a disturbed religious fanatic who called himself Emmanuel, a self-proclaimed prophet with delusions about building a polygamous family. Approximately 7 months before the kidnapping, Elizabeth's mother had encountered Mitchell panhandling in downtown Salt Lake City and hired him to do yard work at their home for about 5 hours. That brief encounter had given Mitchell everything he needed: knowledge of the home's layout and access to his target. At the camp, Mitchell performed what he called a marriage ceremony, claiming Elizabeth was now his wife. That very first day, he sexually assaulted her, the beginning of daily abuse that would continue throughout her captivity. Elizabeth was often chained to trees, forced to wear robes and veils to disguise her identity, and given the name Shir Jashub, after a biblical figure. Mitchell repeatedly told her she should feel blessed and thankful for what was happening, Though Elizabeth refused to believe his twisted reasoning, the conditions were brutal. Elizabeth was sometimes hidden in a hole in the ground, tied up, and given minimal food and water. She was threatened constantly with death, not just her own, but her family's, if she attempted to escape or call for help. Mitchell controlled every aspect of her existence, imposing what he called a sex schedule and dictating her every move.
Elizabeth Smart was abducted from her Utah home.
The abduction captured the nation's attention.
Elizabeth Smart was taken from her bedroom in the middle of the night.
Missed opportunities. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of Elizabeth's ordeal were the moments when rescue seemed within reach, only to slip away. One day at the Salt Lake City Library, a detective approached the trio and questioned why the young girl was wearing a veil and remaining silent. Mitchell calmly explained that he and his wife were ministers protecting their daughter for her eventual marriage, while Barzee gripped Elizabeth's leg under the table as a warning. The detective accepted the explanation and left. "I felt like hope was walking out the door," Elizabeth later testified. That single moment haunted her. She had been so close to freedom, yet unable to cry out for help. In July 2002, just weeks after Elizabeth's kidnapping, Mitchell attempted to kidnap Elizabeth's cousin, but was unsuccessful. This second attempted abduction went largely overlooked by police at the time. The break in the case months passed. Summer turned to fall, and Mitchell decided to relocate. In late 2002, he transported Elizabeth and Barzee to California, settling near San Diego. There, Mitchell had plans to kidnap another young girl to add to his collection of wives. He befriended a local family, attending dinner at their home, and identified a teenage daughter as his next target. But when Mitchell attempted the kidnapping, a noise in the house frightened him away, and the plan failed. Meanwhile, back in Salt Lake City, a crucial breakthrough was developing. In October 2002, Mary Catherine had a sudden realization. She recognized the voice of the kidnapper. It belonged to a man named Emmanuel, who had briefly worked at their home. She shared this information with her parents, but to their frustration, the police didn't immediately act on the tip. Growing desperate, the Smart family took matters into their own hands. On February 3, 2003, they held their own press conference and released a sketch of Emmanuel based on Mary Catherine's description. The sketch was featured on America's Most Wanted on February 15th. The broadcast proved to be the key. Mitchell's stepson, Derek Thompson, recognized him from the sketch and contacted police. So did Mitchell's ex-wife, who told investigators that Mitchell was sexually abusive and that if he had Elizabeth, she believed the girl would still be alive. Finally, authorities began searching for Brian David Mitchell in earnest. By this time, Mitchell had brought Elizabeth and Barzee back to Utah, settling in the town of Sandy, about 18 miles from Elizabeth's home.
Is a miracle. Elizabeth Smart has been found alive.
The rescue on March 12, 2003, 9 months after her kidnapping. Elizabeth Smart was finally found. Several witnesses recognized Mitchell and Barzee from the America's Most Wanted broadcast and contacted police. Officers approached the trio on a public street in Sandy. When police asked the veiled girl her identity, she initially said her name was Augustine, likely out of fear and conditioning from months of abuse. But the officers were persistent. They separated her from Mitchell and Barzee, and eventually Elizabeth confirmed who she really was. Ed Smart was asked to come to a police station where he assumed he would be identifying remains or evidence. Instead, when he walked in and saw his daughter alive, he was stunned. The news spread rapidly. Elizabeth Smart had been found alive. The reunion at the Smart home was emotional beyond words. Chris Thomas, the family's spokesperson and crisis consultant, later recalled arriving at the house after Elizabeth's rescue and seeing her at the top of the stairs with her siblings, all in their pajamas. "I bawled like a baby," he said. Justice served on March 18, 2003. Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee were formally charged with aggravated kidnapping, aggravated burglary, and sexual assault. However, the legal proceedings would prove lengthy and complicated. Both Mitchell and Barzee were initially deemed incompetent to stand trial due to mental health issues. Mitchell, in particular, became notorious for disrupting court hearings by singing hymns and delivering religious proclamations. For years, the case stalled as competency evaluations continued. Finally, in November 2009, Wanda Barzee accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to her role in the kidnapping and in a courtroom statement apologized to Elizabeth. "I'm so sorry, Elizabeth, for all the pain and suffering I caused you and your family. It is my hope you will be able to find it in your heart and forgive me." Barzee was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, though she was ultimately released in September 2018, a decision Elizabeth Smart publicly protested. Mitchell's trial didn't begin until November 2010, more than 8 years after the kidnapping. Elizabeth, who had been serving as a Mormon missionary in France, returned to testify. Over 3 days on the witness stand, she provided detailed, composed testimony about the sexual abuse and horrific conditions she had endured. On December 10, 2010, the jury rejected Mitchell's insanity defense and found him guilty of kidnapping and unlawful transportation of a minor across state lines with intent to engage in sexual activity. When the verdict was announced, Elizabeth was seen exchanging smiles with her mother in the courtroom. At his sentencing hearing, Elizabeth confronted her abuser directly. "I know that you know what you did was wrong. You took away 9 months of my life that can never be returned. But in this life or next, you will have to be held responsible for those actions, and I hope you are ready for when that time comes." Federal Judge Dale A. Kimball sentenced Mitchell to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He remains incarcerated at a high-security federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. Life after survival. Elizabeth Smart's story didn't end with her rescue. In many ways, it was just beginning. She had to navigate the complicated process of healing from trauma while living in the public eye. She attended Brigham Young University, studying harp performance, and married Matthew Gilmore in 2012. Together, they now have 3 children. But perhaps most remarkably, Elizabeth transformed her trauma into purpose. She became a passionate advocate for missing children and survivors of sexual assault. In 2006, she testified before the United States Congress in support of sexual predator legislation and the Amber Alert system. In 2011, she founded the Elizabeth Smart Foundation, which works to bring hope and end the exploitation of sexual assault through education, healing, and advocacy. Elizabeth has also worked to change the cultural conversation around sexual assault. She's been particularly vocal in criticizing abstinence-only education programs that emphasize virginity above all else. During her captivity, Elizabeth believed that because she had been raped, no one would want her, that she was somehow damaged goods. She's worked tirelessly to combat these harmful beliefs and help other survivors understand that their worth isn't defined by what happened to them. In 2013, she published her memoir, My Story, which became a New York Times bestseller. She followed it with another book in 2018, Where There's Hope, Healing, Moving Forward, and Never Giving Up. She's also produced several Lifetime films about kidnapping survivors and works as a correspondent and commentator, using her platform to keep the issue of missing children in the public consciousness. Lessons and legacy. The Elizabeth Smart case revealed both the power of never giving up and the devastating consequences of investigative missteps. The Salt Lake City Police Department's focus on Richard Ricci, while understandable given his criminal history, consumed valuable time and resources. Their initial reluctance to pursue the Emmanuel lead, information that came directly from the only witness, remains controversial. When the sketch was finally released to the public by the family themselves, Mitchell was identified within days. The case also highlighted broader societal issues about which missing persons cases receive media attention. Elizabeth's disappearance generated massive national coverage, while other missing children, particularly children of color, received far less attention, raising uncomfortable questions about whose stories are considered newsworthy. But perhaps the most powerful legacy of Elizabeth Smart's story is Elizabeth herself. She has taken the worst experience imaginable and used it to help countless others. She's shown that survival is possible, that healing is possible, and that trauma doesn't have to define your entire life. She's advocated for policy changes, educated the public, and provided hope to other survivors. Today, Elizabeth Smart continues her advocacy work while raising her family. She speaks openly about her experiences, not dwelling on the horror, but focusing on resilience, hope, and the importance of fighting for change. She's living proof that even after the darkest chapter, it's possible to write a new story. The kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart was a case that captivated a nation and changed countless lives. From the terrifying night she was taken from her bedroom to her miraculous rescue 9 months later, Elizabeth's story is one of unimaginable horror, missed opportunities, and ultimately, incredible resilience. Today, she stands as a powerful voice for survivors everywhere, proving that it's possible not just to survive trauma, but to transform it into purpose. If this story moved you, please consider supporting organizations that work to protect children and support survivors of abuse. The Elizabeth Smart Foundation continues to provide education and advocacy, and there are countless other organizations doing vital work in this space. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit from hearing Elizabeth's story. Leave a comment below letting me know what other cases you'd like me to cover. And remember, if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, there is help available. You are not alone. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.